The agriculture sector, both crops and livestock, is responsible for over 10% of the global greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change. Importantly, it's the largest source of man-made methane emissions too. We need to get those down fast, and there have to be ways to do it, like reducing burps from cows and adopting more sustainable farming systems that rely less on intensive fertilizers, for example. On the flip side, agriculture and the farmers who produce our food are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, from floods and droughts to long-term changes in local weather patterns. So we need to build resilience into farms and the food systems fast too. There is also a new initiative launching here at COP29 that might help, and we're going to hear about that today. Okay, it's a massive topic, this whole issue of agriculture and climate change, and we can only take a peek into it today. But it's sure to be a huge issue at the next UN climate conference, COP30, taking place in Brazil next year. So to try and help understand some of these complex topics, I mean, I think it's like the two sides of the coin of agriculture, right? Reducing emissions, but also building resilience. To help us, we've got three terrific guests, two in the studio and one who has been pre-recorded, a young farmer from New Zealand. So first up, because I know she has to go in this first section, or after the first bit of this section, is Martina Otto. She's head of the Secretariat of the United Nations Environment Programme's Climate and Clean Air Coalition. I've said it so many times in the last 2 weeks that now I've completely forgotten it, like an old phone number. And we're delighted to be partnering with the CCAC, which is the acronym. Martina, I know that you're working with governments on many solutions to deal with agricultural emissions as they relate to these short-term climate pollutants, particularly, of course, methane being our hot topic here. Tell us about this work on digital extensions for agriculture. What's that?
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here again. Hi, Nick. Yes, we are launching today, actually, a report on digital extension service. And if I say a report, it's a technical and economic assessment panel report. And for those who know and are familiar with that, in the Montreal Protocol, this has been a stellar mechanism to connect awareness about a certain technological solution, looking at business models and connecting that to finance, to unlock finance. And we are doing that for a number of technologies, and we've done one that we're launching today, as I said, on digital extension. And now what is it? Extension services are known in the agricultural sector, and that's pretty much, and I should actually let Julia talk about that much more, but it is to help farmers to adopt good practices, to have access to information, to technologies, to ways of doing it, to help practice change as well. And you mentioned they're vulnerable, so we have to help them. And anything we do in the agriculture and methane space is not to put the finger on the farmers, it's actually to look at what is in it for them to help while we help reduce methane. And now digitalizing that is a way of extending beyond what is able. In a lot of developing countries, they have not enough capacity to send people out to all the farms at all times. Mm-hmm. And here digital solutions can help us. And we both we both spent quite a bit of time in Nairobi, and we know M-Pesa was a real game changer in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Now they have developed, not the same people, but in Kenya they've developed iCow. And it's a similar thing that can actually pick up amazingly. It works in Kenya, it works regionally in Africa already. It's an app, it's different tools that are provided digitally to the farmers to help them with animal health, breeding, applying products, and so on.
Right. And is iCow about emissions reductions, or is it about health and emission reductions? Is about all the things that you need to do with a cow to make it happy, healthy, and less of a burper?
Exactly. It's helping practices, good practices, and it helps improve animal health and so on. It helps improve productivity. So there is really a good story for the farmers, and it's meant to help as well with reduction of methane.
Okay. And I suppose for the viewers, they need to know that they go, oh, wow, it's digital, it's digital. I mean, what about the people? But we know in Africa that the iPhone or the smartphone is like everywhere, isn't it? Everyone's got one.
Totally, everybody. That's why I was referring to M-Pesa, because
Yeah.
you could have said as well, and for those who don't know, M-Pesa is this money transfer thing, the Western Union type of approach to it. And anybody, you can send money to anybody up country in a rural area, and it works. And nobody thought at the beginning, oh, will this work? Will people have access to mobile phones? Well, they do.
Yeah,
they do, and it's not an issue. But the system is not meant to replace the in-person agricultural extension. It's to complement. It's
Right.
very much people-based, and that's
Right.
key as well. It's
Right.
able to be localized as well, to adapt to local context, and that's critical. Obviously, the solutions are not the same in all places.
And you were saying today that was something, this is Agricultural Day at the COP, and as you know, we've not actually been following, our broadcasts have not been naturally following each day of the COP, because often the people on those days are actually busy doing something else, right? So they're not available as guests on shows. So we just mix it up. But by chance, we have done the agricultural story today and on our show, and you mentioned that there's something else, was it announced today, to do with organic waste? Is that worth commenting on?
In
In context of the methane story, but also, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. Indeed, the COP presidency put forward a declaration on how to deal with organic waste. And that's yet another sector relevant for methane, responsible for about 20% of the methane that is emitted globally. And they put it forward with a motto, which is avoid, divert, valorize, and then the infrastructure. Infrastructure stands for methane capture at landfill. But the whole other part is actually capturing things before they become waste.
Yeah.
And that means we capture as well food waste, and that obviously is a topic for us here as well in the context of the Agricultural Day.
Yes. And in fact, UNEP and the FAO have had some very good campaigns on food waste running for several years, since about 2012.
We are indeed working together on the reduction of food waste and loss with a dual responsibility for the indicators on that and so on. And we've done the Food Loss and Waste Day awareness together, yes.
Yeah. And of course that fits in to many things, but it also fits into the other big source of, another big source of methane emissions causing climate change, which is waste in landfills or waste generally of rotting vegetation, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah,
organic
good.
waste rotting away is producing.
Let's see how this declaration goes, because once you have a declaration, you've got to somehow implement it. So that's also important too.
And we had quite a bit of enthusiasm in the room today. Actually, 8 of the 10 biggest emitters of waste methane have joined the declaration. We have captured about 50% of global emissions of waste by the ones that have joined the declaration. And indeed, it's only the starting point. We'll have to work on the implementation.
Okay. Good, Martina. Now, I know you have to run to somewhere else. We're going to move on to now. Thank you very much
Nick.
indeed. Well, that's a good idea. Okay. So farmers are going to be key. They need support and they need assistance to reduce emissions while also producing food and having a sustainable livelihood. But they also need help with resilience. We will hear now from a young farmer from New Zealand whose family have transformed their farm from being an emitter of climate gases to being a climate positive farm, a resilient farm too, and in doing so have achieved something called B Corp certification, also working with the government of New Zealand. Let's hear from Finn Ross.
So I'm personally really passionate about reducing methane emissions because I love food and fibre, I love farming, and I really think globally agriculture it contributes around 25% of global emissions at the moment, but there's a huge opportunity to switch agriculture from being part of the problem to the key part of the solution globally. So I'm really excited about trying to champion agriculture as a big solution to climate change globally.
So tell us about the problem of methane in livestock agriculture.
So globally, agriculture accounts for 40% of methane emissions. Methane's, I think, quite unique in that it's a short-lived gas. So there's people on both sides of the argument saying that, hey, we don't need to lower methane emissions as much. They're advocating for this GWP star metric because it's short-lived and it's degrading after around 12 years. But on the flip side of that, there's also a massive opportunity with methane emissions to have a real profound impact on global emissions reduction in the short term, because it is such a potent greenhouse gas in the short term. So, cuts to methane emissions globally can have a really profound impact on total warming around the planet in the short term.
What new exciting technologies are coming up in this field to address this problem?
There's a number of exciting new technologies coming out when it comes to methane reduction. There's methane vaccines being developed, still pretty early days in the labs. There's synthetic methane reducers. These are, chemicals that are produced in the lab that you feed to livestock that inhibit methanogenesis, which is the process by which methane is created in the gut of a ruminant. It's an enzyme that inhibits the enzyme in the gut. There's also this Asparagopsis seaweed, which is close to my heart, given my PhD's on seaweed as a climate change solution. So there's this seaweed that has this bromoform compound that inhibits methanogenesis in the gut. So there's a number of really exciting new technologies coming to the table. None of them have yet been scaled up, and it's unclear if we can scale them up on pastoral farming. So easier to feed these things to livestock in feedlot situations, but a little bit unclear on how we could scale them up in pastoral farming. But there's some solutions to that as well. Like, could we put these methane reducers in salt licks or in water troughs or in bolus, which is like a slow release capsule in the ruminant's gut? So you could give a bolus to livestock to a cow, and it would slowly release these compounds into the ruminant's gut, which would inhibit methane producing. And the great thing about that is it not only cuts down on emissions, but it also is good for the livestock, because it means livestock gain weight faster, and so there's animal health benefits as well. Yeah.
What needs to happen in order for these solutions to scale?
Funding's the big one. We need a lot of funding to go into R&D for methane reduction technologies. We also need funding to allow to finance this onto farms around the world, to scale it up so farmers are receptive. They see that not only cutting methane emissions is good for the planet, but it's also good for their bottom line with weight gains that will happen in livestock as a result. So yeah, funding this technology onto farms for farmers, so that it's not a cost to them to introduce this technology on farm.
Do you see any role for regulators there? Do we need to be making rules that farmers should follow?
Yeah, so I think there's a really big role for regulators to play, both with the carrot and the stick. I see Denmark has just announced they'll be the first country to introduce methane pricing, which will, as a stick that'll really motivate farmers to introduce methane reduction technologies. But we also need the carrot as well. Payments to farmers so that they can adopt this technology to scale it up, and I guess that needs to come from the big food companies, but also from regulators as well.
So what does this mean for the consumer? What should they have in mind when they go to the supermarket?
Yeah, so the question of how much consumers will drive sustainable consumption in agriculture is really interesting. I'm proudly wearing all wool today, and from my family farm as well, which is really important to me. And most consumers don't know where their clothes come from, and where their food comes from. So consumers certainly have a big role. I have this debate with my dad quite a bit, actually. He thinks that consumers are going to drive the majority of sustainable transformation in agriculture. I say that the majority of the world's consumers are purchasing purely on price, so we certainly need everyone. We certainly need consumers to pay more attention to their clothes and their food, but we also need government and business to play their role as well.
And what are your hopes for COP? What would you like to see coming out of these negotiations at the conference?
Across the board at COP, I want to see deep, meaningful, systemic change, I think, like we all do. I guess specifically at this COP, Article 6 progress, I think Article 6 can facilitate really meaningful change for a lot of farmers around the world if we can be pragmatic about the way we implement these carbon markets through Article 6. So it allows small-scale farmers all around the world to access new revenue for nature restoration on farms. That's what I would really like to see.
Well, Finn, thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be with you guys.
So thanks to Finn, and thanks to his family farm in New Zealand, which is doing amazing work also on resilience building. At COP29 today, a new initiative from the COP29 Azerbaijani presidency and the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization was announced, focusing a lot on building resilience to the kinds of shocks that might happen as a result of escalating climate change. I'd now like to welcome Julia Wolf, who's Natural Resources Officer from the FAO's Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment, to tell us a little bit more about this announcement today. What is this new initiative called, and what does it seek to achieve, Julia?
Thank you so much, Nick, and thanks for having me and the Food and Agriculture Organization. So this morning, early and bright, 9 a.m., the meeting room was full, and COP29 presidency from Azerbaijan, in support with FAO, launched this initiative, which is called the Harmonia initiative. It's with IY, so that's it's spelled differently.
Yep.
And it basically has three different objectives. So the first objective is basically to map the current initiatives, which are over 100 initiatives, which touch all the different areas, like food, agriculture, water, food security, food systems. So there's so many with this uplifting of the topic. So many initiatives has been created, and Azerbaijan's leadership was on say, let's try to cluster the initiatives into one that really seeks to find synergies between the different initiatives, just to be effective and be focused on delivery on the ground. That's the first objective. The second objective is finance, and we heard it already a little bit from the New Zealand farmer. One of the key gaps is really the climate finance for the agriculture sector, for agri-food systems. It's roughly 4% of total climate finance going to the rural areas. It's 1.7% tripling down to farmers, right? So you can hear already that's to scale up, and all these wonderful initiatives is
peanuts.
Just like
it's peanuts.
It's peanuts,
yeah.
no?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if we want to see the system change, it's really a question between high-level political. It's with the banks, and they were there. World Bank was there, like all different development bank was there, and they're listening carefully because their portfolio need to deliver to farmers, right? So the second goal of the initiative is really to host this conversation on how more targeted finance can go to the national and local level. Mm-hmm. And the third pillar is basically the inclusive pillar, which is targeting farmers, but in particular also women and youth, and really providing a platform for their voice. There were some farmers and farmer organizations in the room, and it's also preparing. There will be in 2026. There will be an annual year announced of rural farmers and women farmer in particular. So that's kind of preparing the ground already for 2026. But it's really trying to not leave them out, because often in these political processes they don't have sufficient voice, including also other vulnerable groups like indigenous peoples, etc. So this is to say, this is kind of what's the framing for COP29. Mm-hmm. So let me explain something in addition. Mm-hmm. So this Harmonia initiative is actually part of an initiative that was launched by the Egyptian COP presidency 27, which launched a food and agriculture transformation initiative, FAST in short. You may have heard about that. And so to avoid yet another initiative, right, because otherwise you would defeat your own purpose, this Harmonia would become a key flagship program, right? So it will continue from COP to COP as a flagship program under the FAST initiative to do what I just explained in the three objectives, and to really bring together a multiple set of stakeholders. So let me name them again. Also, it's the governments, the parties who are negotiating here, agriculture in the different negotiation tracks. It's the banks and the foundations, no? I mean, Gates Foundation. They're big foundations putting a lot of money on the plate. Let's say for the research, but also for food system transformation. It's the research organizations, it's the farmer organizations, it's the local representatives and indigenous people, which are also increasingly having a voice. So it's really trying to have like an all of society approach for agriculture, which is not just like a sector topic. It's yet a topic that concerns everybody, because we all eat, and it needs to be thought about transversally.
So, I mean, it's interesting that there are many initiatives. It's bringing those initiatives together so that people can understand what is available, financing as well, connecting different stakeholders in a kind of common cause. I suppose when you think about going back in time over the last 20 odd years, there's been a fantastic amount of research, hasn't there? Actually building the case for how to more sustainably manage farming obviously in different circumstances. I mean, if you compare a farm in Germany or a farm in the UK or even the United States, which can even be very different as well, with say a smallholder farm in, I don't know, Togo. I mean, these are different circumstances, but it seems behind all this is, I suppose the question is, do we know how to create sustainable farming systems? And then is the missing element finance to actually scale those up? In your experience, do you think we have a really good handle on what to do?
I think so. I mean, there's the IPCC report, which is really clear in terms of the different adaptation and mitigation options, right? There's plenty of initiatives, but it's not just finance. It's also a lot of governance questions. And let me mention another topic that is really key here. So, and FAO just launched a global analysis on the national determined contribution, which are the Paris Agreement pledges, right? And these are like the third generation of NDCs are coming now to bear.
These are the ones they're doing now, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. So there's this deadline in March 2025. There's like this high mobilization in the rooms here, also through Simon Steele, saying, okay, we really need to look at ambition setting, right? So in theory, you need to pair the ambition setting of agriculture targets, both on adaptation and mitigation. We cannot think that in isolation in the NDC. So that's the expression what countries want to do. And the reality check on the ground in terms of what is really already in implementation, scaling up existing. There's plenty of existing great initiatives, but often they don't reach the negotiation table. No? So this is why I talk about governance, because ultimately to really move that to a larger scale, you need to have planning, finance. You need to, the agriculture friends need to be invited to the table. Sometimes it's diverse ministries. No, it's on forestry, it's on water, no, all the subsectors. It can be on genetic resources, right? So all of this has to come together, and that's very diverse, as you can imagine, in the countries, right? And often countries are also understaffed, no. And that's, we have the challenge here in the negotiations, but also like in particular least developed countries, right? They need a lot of capacity support, and they're asking for it here. No, there's a separate leg group here in UNFC, the least developed country expert group, and they're very clear that they need more support on agri-food systems, etc. Right? So it's not just throwing money at anybody. It's really like a process of, but it needs to be accelerated, no? I mean, your topic is, we don't have time to waste,
exactly.
right? So our vision, FAO and the different initiatives, in particular in Harmonia, is like, let's make it a focus, no? Because it's beyond just agriculture production. It's about society, it's about livelihood, and it's about keeping peace in some way as well, because it's really important that everybody has enough access to food, so healthy food, healthy diets, and means of accessing finance, but then also technology and capacity building support, like extension farmers. No, in many countries you have like one extension advisor for 2,000 farmers, right? So there needs to be like a technology leap as well, right? That to really get the advice to the farmer and enable the farmer to really perform what he's able to do within his livelihood.
I suppose some people always say, you know, farmers are very conservative, but then one can understand why, because if you get it wrong in a poorer country, nobody's got anything to eat, and if you get it wrong maybe in, say, the USA or something, your farm might go broke.
Exactly.
And but I mean, we had some shows with Unilever about 2 years ago about, you know, regenerative agriculture and bringing lots of people on to talk about it. This seemed a very good way of bridging the kind of gap between those that are very keen on organic and those, say, from the industry are quite keen on, you know, pesticides and intensive fertilizers. It seemed that the regenerative area was where everyone could kind of come together a bit and not throw stones at each other, but, you know, kind of feel a bit calm, you know. And so, but that takes about 4 or 5 years for a farm to convert to regenerative, or it takes a while for the soil to heal, I suppose. That's the term. But it seemed that many farmers that we talked to were actually getting economic benefits from that, less fertilizer use, yeah, good quality crops, and they were feeling quite good about things. Yeah.
So maybe just on that, it's interesting you named regenerative agriculture. So from a farm perspective, in the end, it's the farmer or the country who picks the approach. No, like in the past, we had like climate smart agriculture a lot. It's still done by a lot of countries. Like Kenya is very keen on. They have strategies on climate smart agriculture. There's agroecology, right? So I think there's all these different principles. For us, it's really important to look at sustainability of farming systems. It's about reduction of harmful, like mineral fertilizer, right? And partly also
which would
on
also
repurposing.
reduce methane emissions.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's not like the one approach fits the bill, right? So
Yeah.
that's really important to also not impose approaches. I think it's rather important to speak about principles
Yeah.
and how the practices should be
Yeah.
like not harming nature and bringing like livelihood and sustainability to.
And whatever system works, as long as it can be implemented quickly and has the benefits of producing good quality food and is sustainable, it doesn't necessarily matter. As long as it's good for the environment, it's good for the people, and it's also good for the economics, then this kind of brings everything together. That's what we need. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay. Good. Well done working with the COP29 presidency to get the Harmonia initiative, is it, or declaration?
Right. Initiative. It's an initiative.
Okay, under the belt. So a win for the presidency, hopefully at the COP. And good news maybe today that the 1 trillion for the developing world yearly might happen. This was the rumor about an hour and a half ago that it might be on the cards now. So fingers crossed for the close. And thanks very much indeed, Julia, for being with us.
Thanks, Nick, for having me.
Okay, thank you.